I was recently actually at a seminar of a beautiful team of physicians that described, that named a quote from Benjamin Franklin that said, God does the healing and the doctors just take the fee. And it made us laugh, but it's true that what we are doing is actually, we're not healing people, we're showing them how to heal themselves. And that's a very powerful thing to understand.
If you knew that you could experience the best life ever, would you try? Are you heading along the right path in life? Welcome to Change Your Mind, Change Your Life with your hosts Jim and Lynn Swearingen. In our program, you'll learn to dispel the myths surrounding hypnosis, and by doing so, start to piece together the life that you've always wanted. Now, here are your hosts, Jim and Lynn Swearingen.
Welcome to Change Your Mind, Change Your Life. I'm Jim.
And I'm Lynn.
Bringing you uncommon solutions for common problems. Our goal is to give you the knowledge and tools you need to let go of limiting beliefs and tap the power of your mind.
Before the show, I was thinking back about my own family, and I was reminded of an aunt who attempted suicide several times, a nephew that grew up with a learning disorder and later in life was diagnosed with schizophrenia, a relative who suffered severe depression and paranoia, and then there was that aunt with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, who literally pushed all of her loved ones out of her life with her obsessive cleaning. She would literally run a cleaning rag right under your hands on a table or your feet on the floor with a mop. And over years, I can think of several friends and acquaintances who suffered from various diagnosable disorders. There's been a rather common assumption that hypnosis isn't effective or even feasible for those with certain emotional and physiological disorders. But one of the symptoms for some of the common mental illnesses were actually coping mechanisms caused by trauma. And I don't mean to only talk about mental illness and to downplay the dramatic effect that medical problems have on our society and the cost of that. Our guest today is very heavily involved in clinical hypnotherapy for medical conditions, as well as helping people with deep trauma and mental suffering mentally. She's developed a unique approach using advanced hypnosis techniques to tackle just such problems, and with impressive results.
I've done a bit of Googling myself, and I found that globally over 450 million people suffer from mental illness. 1 in 5 American families are affected. 7% of U.S. adults are depressed at any one time. 2.6% or 5.7 million adults in the U.S. have bipolar disorder. Another 1 in 100 people are affected by schizophrenia in their lifetime. Anxiety disorders, including panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, that's OCD, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, and phobias affect about 18.7% of the adults, or 40 million adults.
And the economic and emotional toll on Americans is really sad. The cost of mental illness in the United States is thought to be about $79 billion, and about 80 million workdays per year are lost due to stress, anxiety, and depression. And approximately 11 per 100,000 people commit suicide each year in the United States alone.
Oh, so let's break down from statistics and get real. We have a distinguished guest today who's tackling these big problems in a very big way. Genviev Martin Bernard, a forensic and clinical psychotherapist, hypnotherapist, that specializes in teaching others to harness the power of their minds to overcome adversity and heal from trauma. A summa cum laude graduate of the University of Sorbonne in Paris, she works closely with doctors, psychiatrists, nurse practitioners, and social workers on a wide variety of mental, emotional, and physiological conditions, including trauma, PTSD, depression, fears, phobias, anxiety, personal disorders, and behavioral problems.
Genviev is a member of the National Guild of Hypnotists, is on the board of directors of the Oregon Hypnotherapy Association. She has decades of experience researching, practicing, and teaching the concepts and applications of hypnotherapy in the U.S. and overseas.
Genvieve is also a published author, lecturer, and featured guest in leading French and American TV and radio shows, the producer of Last Frontier, a series dedicated to exploring the untapped potential of the mind. Welcome to the show, Genvieve.
Thank you, Jim and Lynn. It's a pleasure to be on board. Thank you for inviting me.
We're so excited to have you with us.
Yes, we are.
You've approached the subject in a very clear manner. I think it is a serious concern, mental disorders, and we have a unique approach to addressing those disorders. I'd like to start a little bit with my background with this. I started experiencing with the flexibility of the boundaries of the mind in early childhood. Being called to overcome a series of traumas, I stumbled time and again on the phenomenon known as dissociation. So as you know, dissociation is our nervous system's natural response to trauma. So the dissociative states disconnects our minds from our bodies and emotion in a way that we can no longer feel physical pain, shed tears, connect with our emotions, communicate or interact with others. And it's actually a very natural response which we share with all living beings. If you see a chase in the wild, when an animal is pursued by a predator, through the length of the chase, the prey is obviously very much engaged in the form. It's fully present in its body, actively immersed in the flight mechanism aimed at saving its life. However, the instant the predator's jaws will close on the throat of the prey, you will notice the prey's body instantly become loose, limp, relaxed, and comfortable, the very characteristics of hypnosis, of course, as you know. And so dissociation allows the nervous system to shield itself from a level of physical, psychological, and or emotional harm, the intensity of which would be impossible to absorb. So doing so, however, what it does is it opens a door into the realm of the subconscious mind. So having had this opportunity to journey back and forth between the boundaries of the mind as a child, I realized very early on what could be achieved when we work with the subconscious level of the mind, and that was enough to spark a lifelong fascination. And by the time I was 15, I was already experiencing with hypnosis on friends and classmates, testing the mind's ability to overcome obstacles and boost human capacities. And so basically, it's well known today that most mental illnesses have a very solid root cause that is more often than not based on a trauma that happened sometime in the past. And my personal belief, as I've studied this field for some time now, is that every mental disorder is in one way or another linked to a trauma in the person's past that the mind was unable on some level to process accordingly. So what happens is the mind puts these coping mechanisms, as you just actually explained, Lynn, it's very well said. The mind puts coping mechanisms in order to protect itself from a level of fear or insecurity that, and when the trauma happened at a very young age, the person feels very vulnerable, and so therefore it creates in our mind a sense of acute danger of our world around us, a sense of insecurity, a sense of fear, and the person grows from that point on in a state of acute alertedness, acute awareness, hypervigilance, if you want, that creates consequences. And so until now, we have known medically that that trauma is responsible in a large manner for mental disorders, but what has not been developed or explored very much is how to address that trauma, how to go back to what we call the initial sensitizing event, the ISE, or the root cause, if you want, of that very trauma. And so what is typically done with mental disorders today is we suppress the symptoms. People are ordered prescription medications or are given prescription medications that basically won't treat the cause. What it does is suppress the symptoms. So the cause remain very much unaddressed, right? And So if you suppress the symptoms long enough, what happens is the disease continues expanding and the mind continues trying to alert you that there is something there that needs to be addressed. So our groundbreaking research and results are based on addressing the cause. And going back to the initial event, we find that the mind, and that's what's absolutely magnificent, is still not altered in any way. Once you resolve the cause, the problems disappear, and it's absolutely magnificent to witness.
Do you find that things like schizophrenia, autism, there are different mental disorders that we've been led to believe are completely medical in origin. Do they also have roots in trauma?
Well, most often than not, they actually do. And actually, I've been working with a case of dissociative identity disorder, diagnosed as also mental retardation, borderline personality disorder, PTSD, and speech disorder, all in the same person. And once again, there is a very, as always, we find that there's a very strong trauma happening early on in life, and the mind is just put under such severe stress that it protects itself by putting all these mechanisms together because the person, the mind believes that it's in danger. And so once we go back to the cause, and I mean, recently I've been working with a man who came to see me. He's in his 30s, diagnosed it's another case, but diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, chronic pain, general arthritis, arrhythmia, sleep apnea, a number of problems. He was, when he came to consult with me in the first consultation, he was pacing the room back and forth, holding his head in excruciating pain, physical, mental agony. I mean, a level of pain that was impossible for him to endure. And that's the result of acute stress. And I contacted his psychiatrist, who explained to me that the person had been unresponsive to treatment and was no longer even keeping his medical visits. And so this man is pacing the room like a caged animal, telling me severe suicidal ideation, multiple suicide attempts, telling me he can no longer endure the pain he's going through. And in one session, we brought him back. So a lot of time, there's not just one cause for trauma. In traumatic background, very often there's multiple causes. But every step of the way, when we go back to the initial sensitizing event, we bring the person back to what it was that created that heightened sense of stress, distress. Well, at the time, the person is maybe 2, 3 years old, so very vulnerable to their environment. And by the time they come to see us, with hypnotherapy being one of the last resort that people think of, obviously, because it's still not very well known. So they've tried everything else, and by that time they've been labeled as mentally ill, and so all that adds to their stress, and they come to see in a state of hopelessness and despair and helplessness that they think that nobody can help them anymore. And so we bring that person back, and in this case, this man is now a full-grown adult, very powerful, very smart man. And so we bring him back to the source of what it was that created that heightened sense of fear. And now with his mind of today, we analyze the event from an adult perspective. He's no longer in that situation. So yes, at that time, it was a situation that was very frightening for him and endangering. And so his mind as a child was very right in sensing a heightened sense of danger. But today, the situation is no longer the same. So when we bring him back to that time and we reconnect with that child that has remained fractured within ever since, remained fractured and terrified and alone and scared. So we reconnect with that part of us, that broken child, that fractured child, and we rescue that child. And we bring comprehension to that child, telling them, you were right. It was dangerous back then, but today is a different situation. Today you are strong. And then we have a sort of a meeting from the adult self to the child back then. And so the child back then gets to meet the adult self of today, who has grown, in spite of these challenges, has grown to be strong, smart, solid, and steady. And when this meeting takes place, we take the child that was broken and allow that part of us to understand that the danger is no longer there, because today we have new means to protect ourselves, because today we have a new comprehension. We're not in the same situation anymore, and even if we were, we would now have different ways to resolve and protect ourselves. So there is an instant healing that takes place there, and it's absolutely magnificent to witness. It's a miracle every day, I would say, because then the person emerges with a state of serenity and well-being and peace, and they're shedding tears. And so this man, in his first session, for the first time in his life after that, he was able to finally get some restorative, long, restful nights that he had been unable to sleep for all of his life, because he couldn't close his eyes at night because he was afraid, and he didn't even know of what exactly, because the mind blocks, you know. But so now we restore that, and so that was just the first session. We've only done 3 sessions. His physical pain is now 90%, 90% resolved. He's sleeping deeply. He's serene. His wife called me and said, I took a picture of my husband because he is so transformed. I was so stunned to see his actual physical transformation that I took a picture of him. And basically, I see people like losing 10 years. They're going back in time. They're regaining their youth, their serenity, their well-being. And so this man is holding my hands with tears in his eyes, telling me, is that how everybody else feels? Is that how he's feeling so serene after a lifetime of agony? And that's what we see happen every single day when we go back to the source of the trauma, the initial sensitizing event, and we let it go. We heal it in a way that today is no longer the same situation. So today we are able to let go of these self-destructive mechanisms. And what we find out is when the heightened sense of fear and anxiety and distress and alertedness is gone, the mind resumes to working as it always was supposed to work. We don't find a damaged mind under that. We find a mind that was always perfectly healthy. It was just a heightened strength of fear and insecurity that then produced all these side effects. And when you add prescription medication to that, which puts people in a state of fog and disconnects them from the clarity of their mind, so then there is this whole series of side effects. But when you resolve the trauma, the mind returns to doing what it was supposed to do. And his mind is smart and sharp and very much aware and awake, and he's just absolutely well. So it's absolutely phenomenal to see that.
It is phenomenal. We're getting close to a commercial break, so when we come back, I know you've developed a really special, unique technique to be able to make a breakthrough like that in one session, and we'll be asking you about that. But
right.
I know what you're talking about. There was a woman in here this week who had no idea, why am I behaving the way I'm behaving? And the same thing. In one session, she had such a revelation, such a huge breakthrough. I couldn't even imagine her smiling. And at the end of the session, she had this wonderful smile on her face, and she said, I know why I'm doing it. And she did. It was completely logical. It made sense. She knew exactly why she was behaving the way she was. And she could smile and say, there isn't anything wrong with me. I know what it is. I can deal with it. All you need to do is find out what it is, and that serenity comes that you're talking about.
It's a beautiful process. I mean, we witness miracles on a day-to-day basis, and I was recently actually at a seminar of a beautiful team of physicians that described that named a quote from Benjamin Franklin that said, God does the healing and the doctors just take the fee. And it made us laugh, but it's true that what we are doing is actually, we're not healing people, we're showing them how to heal themselves. And that's a very powerful thing to understand, because it means that from that moment on, they have the power to continue healing themselves. But basically, the way in which our approach is different is we use a very unique analytical approach to root cause and dissociated dialogue therapy that we've developed with my colleague Patrick Glancy. And so using advanced hypnosis techniques enables us to unveil what the root cause the initial sensitizing event. In other words, the source responsible for setting in motion the mental, emotional, or physiological disorders. And so what we constantly or consistently find out through our research and our work is when we use suggestion hypnosis alone, it can be very powerful in a short-term basis or on a long-term basis if the cause prompting the behavior underneath the surface is not very strong. But if there is a strong cause underneath the surface, if we're not addressing the cause, then what we're doing, and it's also relates to, for instance, trying to solve a problem with the conscious level of the mind, if you wish. So I like to compare the mind like an iceberg. So the conscious level of the mind is the very small tip of the iceberg that you see appearing above the surface of the water. And so with your willpower and your conscious comprehension and logical understanding and all that, you can take all the strength that you can master and move that iceberg by the tip there. And if you're trying very hard, and that's why people battle and try to change their problem with their willpower, and it's such a hard uphill battle, because they're trying to move the iceberg by the tip, by the conscious level of the mind.
Right.
When underneath the surface is the massive subconscious level of the mind that's hidden below the surface, and that's moved by oceanic currents the other direction. So you might be able to move the iceberg a little bit, but eventually the mass below the surface will bring you back the other way. So what we do is we dive directly to the source, to the cause of the problem. And we do that by accessing, by tuning into the negative emotion. So for a short moment in time, we exacerbate the negative emotion, the anxiety, the panic, the depression, the sense of hopelessness and despair. I get people to really, in a deep level of hypnosis, I get people to really connect for a very short time to these very negative emotion and make them bigger for a little bit. And then we track them right back to their cause. A lot of time, it is something that the person has completely forgotten. Sometimes they think they know what it is, and sometimes it's something else. And sometimes they know what it is, but once you bring them back to the cause, it's amazing to see the mind always knows where the cause is, always. When a person tells me, how will you find out what the cause is? I say, I will not find out, you will find out. And they tell me, well, but I don't know what it is. And sure enough, their mind knows exactly. So once we unveil what the root cause is, it enables us to restore the perspective of the person. So very often, belief that were taken on in early childhood as truth were actually had nothing to do with the truth. It was a reflection of somebody else's problem, somebody else's reality, a reflection of somebody else's inner fear, somebody else's sense of limitation. And the child takes this in as a truth about themselves. And because as children we function primarily in the subconscious level of the mind, we accept that as a truth. And so therefore the rest of our life, if it's not addressed, we're going to continue acting upon that truth, which is not a truth, which is simply a reflection of somebody else's problem. So by addressing that, we're able to restore the proper perspective and repair the person's sense of self-worth and self-confidence and value and well-being. And by doing that, the change is immediate, because there is an immediate relief of that weight that they had been carrying. And a lot of people, after their first session tell me, I feel so light. I feel like a huge weight has been relieved from my shoulders. And that's because for all of their life, since whatever event happened, they've been carrying a wrong perspective about themselves that was a reflection of somebody else's problem that had nothing to do with them. So it's weighing us down, and it's limiting our abilities and the mind. And there is then an internal dialogue, because a part of us knows that this is not beneficial. So we've got this internal battle going on within us, between the part of us that knows that this is not a valid behavior and the part of us that's still convinced that that's a truth. So when you resolve that battle, then you've got an internal team that works together in perfect harmony. And so imagine the power that it gives you. You're free to soar forward, unencumbered by illusions, by wrong perspective.
Excuse me. Genvieve, Let me ask you something. Most hypnotherapists do this kind of work using various approaches for emotional release, or perhaps the affect bridge, different types of getting back to the source and finding this kind of release. I know that you have a very unique approach. Is there anything that you can share that gives us an idea of how this is different, what enables you to get to a breakthrough like you did with that person you illustrated? They had so many problems and you were able to break through in one session. Is there something different you're doing from what the rest of us are?
Well, absolutely. Well, I'm very surprised actually to find out from clients who come to me and keep telling me that they've been seeing other hypnotherapists and all they received was suggestion work. And we've done a little bit of research with our colleagues, and we found out that actually the vast majority of hypnotherapists or hypnotists do not go back to cause. The vast majority apparently seem to just stop at suggestion work. And so what we find, we don't even start with suggestion until we have substantially resolved the cause. And what we find that once you resolve the cause, suggestion is not even needed, because once the cause is properly addressed, then the person's behavior is relieved. So I was very surprised, because I've studied hypnosis from childhood, as I said, and I've always worked with cause, but apparently there's a lot of us, there's a lot of our colleagues in the profession who are reluctant in addressing the cause. And I think it's important for us to spread the word and to spread the results in understanding that, going back to address the cause. And we might do it in a bit of a different way. I mean, we use that affect bridge, and then we also use dissociated dialogue therapy. So it's different techniques, but basically, and so dissociated dialogue therapy is when a part of you is fighting against another part of you, which we always have when we are struggling to achieve something and there's an obstacle. It's always because there's a part of ourselves that is wanting to achieve that goal, and a part of ourselves who is opposing to that goal. And the ultimate, what's interesting is both parts always want the same thing. They want your well-being and safety and solidity, but they're going about it in a different manner. So by doing dissociated dialogue therapy, what we're doing is getting the two parts to negotiate and agree on a common path. And so basically we're doing that at a deep level of hypnosis, and it's a dialogue, and it's about resolving the internal battle that's going on to allow you to move forward in a very harmonious and fluid and flowing manner. But basically, our unique approach is heavily involving the cause, going back to the cause. And the way, that I achieve it is by exacerbating the problem for a short moment of time, taking the negative emotion, putting the person in a situation with their mind where they experience that negative emotion, be it anxiety or fear or depression or sadness, sense of hopelessness, helplessness, whatever it is they're struggling with. I ask them an example situation where they feel that problem the most acutely, and when they are in a state of deep hypnosis, we project them in that exact situation to exacerbate the problem for a little bit, and then bring their mind back to what it was, what the original event was that enabled these negative emotions to enter their experience of life. And when we get there, that's when the work takes place.
And you use the word dissociated. Explain what that means for our listeners.
Well, it is simply to separate the parts of yourself. So there's a part of yourself that is wanting to be free of this problem, right? Then that's the part that led you to me. There's a part of yourself that's wanting to experience relief and serenity and freedom and well-being. But there is a part of yourself that's holding on to that problem for dear life. And the part of yourself that is holding on to that problem for dear life is not doing it to aggravate or hurt you. It's doing it because it thinks that this is for your benefit. So what we're doing with dissociated dialogue therapy is we separate those parts at depth during hypnosis, and we take the part of yourself that is holding on to that problem, and we imagine it and share across the room from you, and we allow that part to go back in time to the very first day that it started grabbing onto that problem, and we're then back at the cause. It's just another way to go back to the cause. And so we understand, we appreciate the role of this part, because this part, we've been working very hard, obviously, all this time, thinking it was protecting you against something. So we appreciate and value the role of this part, and then we negotiate with this part, understanding that today this behavior is not helping you. It is damaging your sense of self, worth and well-being. And so by negotiating with that part and recognizing its efforts and its value, we're able to bring the two parts in accordance and in harmony and get them to work together. And usually that problem is solved right there too.
That makes sense.
That's absolutely. You have to know what the problem is before you can deal with it.
Absolutely.
You gave us a couple of really great examples. Are there any recent cases that you want to share?
Well, yes, absolutely. So I was talking about that woman that was brought to me by her team of social workers with a case of dissociative identity disorder, mental retardation, borderline personality disorder, PTSD, and a speech disorder. So when she came to see me the first time, she was curled forward, walking with a walker, looking old and bent forward, and she wouldn't look me in the eyes. She had a bit of a wandering eyes problem, and so she wouldn't look me in the eyes. With her speech disorder, she was very difficult to understand, and she was covered in shawl and sort of clothing, trying to hide herself. And I sometimes wonder, am I going to be able to help this person? No matter how many miracles you see, we're humans, so the doubt is always there, And within weeks, it's been such an incredible transformation. The walker disappeared, and then she started changing her clothing. Today, she walks in here perfectly straight, wearing athletic clothing. Her hair is clean. She looks beautiful. She looks at me straight in the eyes. We've had a case where she had to express herself because she encountered a little bit of an issue with other people, and so I started teaching her how to speak clearly, and that day she was walking with me here in my office, her shoulders back, her chin held high, and the social worker, the team of social workers that brought her, who bring her to me every week, just were stunned. It's a physical transformation, and you see the person. I think it compares to, you have a precious stone, a diamond or a beautiful stone that's been dragged through mud and sand, and it's covered with all this dirt, and so you can't see what's underneath. And what we do is allow this person to cleanse themselves from the wrong perception and the illusion, and what appears underneath is a magnificent human being every single time. And you see that metamorphosis taking place in front of your eyes, and it's so beautiful. It's absolutely startling. So it's never ceases to amaze me. No matter how many times you see it, every day is a new miracle in motion. And it's the miracle of seeing that the body and mind know exactly how to heal themselves. But we take on these blocks, these obstacles, stress and fear and all that, which prevent us from being who we really are. And when we resolve these matters, your true self emerges, and in all of its beauty and light and power and strength and intelligence and kindness, and it's absolutely magnificent.
I'm sitting here with a big smile on my face as you tell that story, because two things. One, I was going to ask you what you enjoy most about your work, but that's obvious. It's what you see. It's those miracles. And I was remembering, what made me become interested in hypnosis was when Jim had started the business, and he was seeing clients, and he was coming home so excited because he was seeing that transformation over and over again. He could see that someone that he might have spent weeks or months doing cognitive therapy with would come in one session, as you described that woman, frumpy, hiding themselves, not making eye contact, no self-esteem, devastated by life. And maybe in that session, but at least by the next session, that person would come walking in a completely changed person. Maybe all of the problems weren't gone or resolved yet, but the person would come back with dressed beautifully, standing straight, making eye contact with a new confidence that they could deal with this.
Absolutely.
So it really is amazing.
So Genviev, tell us how we can reach you if someone wants to reach you and avail themselves of your services. How can they reach you?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. So basically, my website is the best way to get a hold of me, and that's GenvievHypnosis.com. And I'm going to spell that for you because my first name being European, it's obviously a little tricky. So Genvieve is G as in George, E as in Edward, N as in Nancy, V as in Victor, I-E-V as in Victor, and then the word hypnosis. Of course, you know how to spell it, .com. And my email address, once you're on the website, you can find my phone number and email address is Genvieve@GenvievHypnosis.com. But basically, that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Tell us, are there any obstacles that you encounter in this type of work?
Well, absolutely. There are actually two main obstacles that we encounter occasionally, and the first one being prescription medications. Because the base of our work is to work with the emotions, the negative emotions of the person. When they're taking especially mood stabilizers, anxiety medication, all prescription used to block the emotional state can constitute a substantial obstacle with our work in that it blocks the person from experiencing, really, from tuning into their emotions. So we work with their doctors with that, but that can be one obstacle. And we still work with people that are on prescription medication, and very often we do achieve the same. It's just easier for us to work when the person is really in tune with their emotion. And the second, the same, but of course we're not physicians, so we're not going to tell people to stop their medication. It's absolutely not what we're doing, but we just let them know that when they're taking these medications, the process might be a little longer, a little more time-wise consuming to get them to connect to their emotion. And the other obstacle that can counteract our work is if they're in an environmental context that's counterproductive to the work that is conduced. And as you know, the basics of hypnosis basically are repetition, authority figure, and strong emotion. And that's also the same dynamics that you find in abusive situations. So abuse is a negative hypnosis in a way. So when we're working with somebody in reconstructing their state of well-being and sense of self-worth and sense of confidence, if they're going back home to a situation every day that counteracts our work, it's going to take a little more time to achieve the result. But most of the time, the abuse or the trauma we find has taken place earlier on in life, so that those obstacles don't come in play so much.
That's very interesting. That I never thought about. It's obvious when you say it, but I never really thought about abuse being a negative form of hypnosis. But that explains a lot about the mental state of victims of abuse and how they react.
Absolutely, and they're led to believe that they're not good enough, that they are deserving what they're receiving, the abuse that they're receiving. They're led to believe that it is their fault, that they're broken inside.
Sure.
And so it's a negative hypnosis on a day-to-day basis that is extremely powerful, and that leads people to self-destruct. And so... And so what we do is we destroy that negative hypnosis and we rebuild their truth, So if they're no longer in the abusive situation, then it's perfect. When they still are, it's going to take a little bit more work to counteract that effect on a day-to-day basis.
What do you see as the future of our profession?
Well, considering, Lynn, the groundbreaking results that we are witnessing every day in our work with trauma, PTSD, mental, physical, emotional imbalances, I really do have great hopes for the future of our profession. I think it's critical for us to continue working in collaboration with the medical field and to document our work, our processes, our findings, and our results in a solid manner. In fact, I'm in the process of researching and proposing a doctoral thesis or scientific research study to an American university based on our findings and our results working with mental disorders. But I think it is I've been very lucky to be able to work in close cooperation with doctors, psychiatrists, nurse practitioners, social workers. Basically, anytime somebody comes to see me with a diagnosed condition, before working with them, I ask them to obtain a medical authorization from their doctor, and I ask them for their authorization to share my findings and my research and my sessions with their doctors. So what happens then is I work in collaboration with their medical team, and that enables all of us to provide the best solution for the person, because as their mental, emotional, physiological state improves, then the doctor is able to start reducing the medication, the prescription. So working together as a team is critical, and I think that's where I've been very, very lucky to be surrounded by fantastic doctors that are very open-minded and supporting my work.
What does that say?
And I think that's where the future should go.
Okay.
Wonderful. You produced a series called The Last Frontier. Would you tell us about that, please?
Certainly, Jim. Well, The Last Frontier is an exciting new series in which we teach to push beyond our limitations and tune into more of the potential of the mind. And it's a series that is intended for television, but at the moment what we're doing is we're producing a pilot series of 12 to 15 episodes, basically conceived as short movie trailers and presented on YouTube. And so a preview of the series is accessible on my website, genvievhypnosis.com, under the session entitled Genviev TV. And we're trying to produce episodes as regularly as possible. Of course, it's a bit of a challenge considering the rest of the work that we do, but it's a wonderful prospect, and we're all very excited about it.
Oh, that's amazing. You're doing incredible work. We're so glad that we ran across your work on the web and gave you a call.
Thank you, Lynn. It's a pleasure to be able to share with you.
We're just delighted.
What do most of the people you see come in for?
Because I write a lot about trauma and PTSD and stress, and that's basically the bulk of my work. And I work, like as I said, in cooperation with the medical field, and so a lot of doctors are starting to refer their patients. In fact, I once saw a woman who's a doctor, and she came to see me because of severe depression, and she was so startled by the result of her session. She said to me in one session with hypnotherapy, she achieved what she had been seeking through 21 years of cognitive psychotherapy. And so from that moment on, she started referring her patients to me, and that grew. And so I very much enjoy that collaboration with the medical field, because we are able, having much different approach, to provide the best results for each person.
Genevieve, it's been wonderful having you on the show.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was a pleasure speaking with the two of you. Thank you. Thank you both.